The phrase whodunit has moved from crime into the mainstream, and as you all know, refers to a situation where the identity of the perpetrator is not known. Today's case sees a young lady go missing shortly before her imminent wedding. And it's not just a whodunit, it's also a whodun what, a whodun where, and a whodun why. In fact, in the early stages of looking into the disappearance of 24-year-old uber-intelligent PhD student Annie Lay at Yale University, the only thing they could be fairly sure of was when she was last seen. Beyond that, very little was known, and as more became known, it just seemed to get more and more confusing. Locked room mysteries are renowned in myth and legend and literature, but this is as close as I've ever seen to one in the realms of true crime. As is seemingly customary for a 21st century crime, it is surveillance footage and digital data that are central in solving what happened to this effervescent student, planning what was to be one of the most special days of her life. This is Murder of Crows. In San Jose on July the 3rd, 1985, Annie Marie Tu Lay was born. She was Vietnamese American and was part of a close-knit family as she grew from a precocious child into a smart young lady. Very smart and very driven to succeed. In high school, she was voted most likely to be the next Einstein. So her book smarts were very well known throughout the students. She graduated as valedictorian, and her potential was seen outside her high school, as she garnered over $160,000 in scholarships to pursue a career in science. She attended Rochester University in New York, where she got an undergraduate degree in cell developmental biology. Standing at just 4'11" and weighing just 90 pounds, she was physically tiny. But her warm spirit and huge intellect made her a force to be reckoned with. She loved to learn, and she was drawn to intelligent people. So it was no surprise that she was drawn to physics student Jonathan Widowski, and their close friendship blossomed into a love few are blessed enough to find. They were both as committed to their relationship as they were to their respective studies. Jonathan's academic pursuits led him to join a graduate program at Columbia University in New York City in 2007. While Annie's undoubted potential led her to pursue her studies in a research group at Yale University in Connecticut, where she was working on enzyme research that could have had applications in cancer treatment and also treatment of conditions like muscular dystrophy and also diabetes. Despite the distance between them, as they pursued their respective academic dreams, their commitment to each other saw them regularly and with equal dedication make the 2-hour commute to see each other. Ultimately, they saw their futures as a shared one, and with the two blissfully happy, both describing the other as their best friend. With this in mind, Jonathan popped the big question, and the two planned to marry on September the 13th, 2009. It seemed too good to be true, but true it was. Until September the 8th, 2009, just 4 days before the biggest day of her life, when she seemed to vanish into thin air. That day, everything appeared to be normal, and Annie was in good spirits when she left home to go to the lab for the day, just as she had every other working day of the last couple of years. But Annie Lay did not return home that night, which was very out of character for the diligent and predictable 24-year-old. In fact, her roommate found this so out of character that she did not hesitate in reporting Annie missing. Initial investigations turned up some alarming details, but in and of themselves, while they may have been unsettling, they proved nothing in terms of working out where Annie could be. Her phone and purse had been found in the lab, and early checks of surveillance footage showed Annie entering her building at 10 Amistad Street at 10 a.m. on the morning of September the 8th, but no footage could be located showing her leaving. Now, this didn't mean that she hadn't left the building, only that her leaving the building couldn't be corroborated. The FBI were called in to assist quite early on. Now, many of the rooms and labs in the building had restricted keycard access and individual room logs, but it would take time to access and collate this data, and time was of the essence in finding the diminutive student. While waiting for the keycard data, the authorities continued to trawl through the external and internal CCTV footage to try to retrace the steps that Annie had taken that morning. They learned that Annie had started an experiment that morning, but had not completed it, which again was completely out of character. But try as they might, they could find no trace of Annie leaving the building. But as with all disappearances, the authorities talked to friends, family, and anyone close to Annie to build up a picture of Annie's life, of her typical movements, and whether anyone would have a motive to abduct her or otherwise cause her harm. At this stage, it was equally possible that with her wedding approaching imminently, she may have had a case of cold feet and disappeared voluntarily. Through speaking to her closest confidants, they found that yes, she had some small doubts and concerns, but they were thought to be at the same level as anyone heading for a major life change. And there were absolutely no signs of anything that may lead her to run away. And on the contrary, she was really excited to be getting married to her best friend. But was Jonathan quite so ready? As is common with him being her significant other, he would obviously be a person of interest. But he was extremely cooperative with police, and his movements were corroborated, and he was nowhere near Yale that day. So the mystery deepened. As further data trickled in, it became apparent that there were only 2 other people around the same suite of laboratories at the time that Annie was there. An animal technician named Raymond Clark and an external contractor named Larry Godfrey, who was replacing some lighting. Speaking to both men, neither seemed suspicious. They both seemed to want to help the police, and both seemed to have stories that checked out. So the police were no further forward. In a departure from a normal day, the 8th of September also saw a fire alarm at around 12:50 p.m. at 10 Armistead Street, so all staff were required to leave the building. Yet Annie was still not seen among the people evacuating the building. All other staff, including Raymond Clark, were accounted for in the crowd. It was seeming more and more likely that something had happened to Annie. But until they could find Annie, it was difficult to prove that something actually had happened. Key among other checks that needed to be made was checking waste disposal. Now, given that the facility was animal research, there was a dedicated protocol for disposal of animal carcasses, and this needed to be searched. But still no sign could be found. Now, more forensic and microscopic searches of the lab found tiny traces of blood in Annie's lab. Searches around the room turned up some material hidden above the ceiling tiles in the lab. A bloody sock and single disposable glove were found, and the sock was determined to be Annie's. Manual searching of the handwritten room logs found nothing that seemed significant. Raymond Clark had signed into the room with a green pen, but later signed in with a black pen. But having worked in labs like this, I could never find a pen when I needed one, so that was not overly special. More importantly, Annie herself could still not be found. And with a couple of days having passed by now, Yale University put up a $10,000 reward for any information that could help in locating her. Our locked room mystery doesn't even have a body. Forensic teams spread their search from just looking at Annie's lab, which was numbered G13, but across the whole floor. One of the rooms just along from the lab on the same floor is G22, which seemed to be a kind of storage room. On the floor of this room, they found several metallic-looking spheres. On checking back against surveillance footage, they saw that Annie was wearing a beaded necklace. So the finding of these beads was another alarming sign that Annie may have come to harm. Upon checking this room with luminol, the room lit up, and several stains invisible to the naked eye showed across the whole room. So whatever happened to Annie Lee must have happened in room G22. But there was still no body. And as time was passing, a smell began to permeate the entire floor. So the decision was made to bring in a cadaver dog. Much to everyone's confusion, the dog strongly signalled at a wall near the locker room. But of course, all is not always what it seems. And this particular wall had a metal safety hatch on it. On Sunday, September the 13th, the hatch was removed and the smell immediately amplified. Behind that hatch was the body of Annie Lee, and she had been found on what should have been her wedding day. Autopsy results show that she had been severely beaten with broken bones in her face, and rearranged underwear suggested a possible sexual attack. She was missing a sock and a glove, and this matched with the items previously found above the ceiling tiles in Annie's lab. As expected, her beaded necklace was broken, and another item was found with her body that turned out to be extremely significant: a green pen. Keycard access to the rooms on the floor saw Raymond Clark entering the labs far more than normal. 11 times that morning, to be exact, and after 1:30 p.m. his entries in the room logs changed from green ink to black. All eyes were now on Raymond Clark. The police returned to the CCTV footage with renewed vigour as they set about finding more evidence against the young technician. Throughout that day, Clark had been wearing his customary blue scrubs, the type that he always wore for his job. But in the course of rechecking his movements, one particularly eagle-eyed investigator made a key observation. When he left the building on break at around 10 a.m, the trousers of his scrubs were found to have a red drawstring. Then when he was returning to the building after the fire alarm at around 1 p.m, the trousers he was wearing had a blue drawstring. It seemed that at some point that morning, Clark must have changed his scrubs. But perhaps the most damning evidence after forensic analysis turned out to be the green pen found with Annie's body, as this pen was found to have both Annie's and Clark's DNA on it. And also Clark's DNA was found on Annie's bloody sock. Forensics had nailed Raymond Clark to the wall. On heading out to arrest Clark on September the 18th, he was found at a hotel in Cromwell, around 30 miles from Yale University. It seemed that Clark's motive was jealousy. On the morning of 8th of September, Annie had sent a department-wide email to reveal her upcoming wedding and honeymoon. And it seems that this was enough to send Clark into a rage, which culminated in his attacking and killing her. But he was able to keep his cool even when the fire alarm interrupted his attempts to cover up the crime. It is impossible to know if his coldness and his calculated manner was anything to do with his being an animal technician who would be completely at ease around animal death and dealing with animal carcasses, but it could well have desensitized him somewhat. Raymond Clark eventually agreed a plea deal, limiting his jail time to 44 years. But even after having to plead guilty to the murder under the details of the plea deal, he still could not bring himself to admit sexually assaulting Annie Lee, with him making an Alford plea in regards to this part of the criminal complaint, so he would never actually have to say he was guilty of sexual assault. So our locked room mystery was finally solved by dogged investigative work, as well as Raymond Clark's attachment to his green pen. Clark's jealousy may have been understandable. I mean, we've all been jealous at times, I'm sure. But his rage and seeming belief in "if I can't have you, no one will" was, of course, beyond unacceptable. Annie Leigh was about to start a new chapter in her life alongside her best friend, and that was snatched away from her, leaving her fiancé, her family, and her friends grieving her loss and wondering what might have been for the student who was already making a mark in research science. This video is, of course, dedicated to Annie Leigh. This beautiful Vietnamese American student was vivacious, driven, intelligent, and happy. And while she was voted most likely to be the next Einstein, that potential was brought to an all too brief end at the hands of a cruel bastard. I hope her friends and family have found ways to deal with the loss of such a bright light. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. This is Samson. I'm your co-presenter, Steve, and we will see you when we see you.
Say that you're ready, but you won't like it. You say that